After Knuckle Duster separates the parasite from his daughter Hachisuka, he shifts his focus to his family's recovery, leaving his weapon behind in Koichi's penthouse. Is he walking away for good? And what does that mean for the Vigilantes now that a new villain using the bees has emerged? Let's find out. The appearance of vile and violent villains in the Narahata neighborhood never ceased. The next dangerous incident was always just around the corner. That's why there were always scenes of people running away from those who spread terror. Fortunately, there were those who helped, like Koichi. He then told the villain that was as far as he would go. He introduced himself as the Crawler, the vigilante who quickly responds to the scene when someone cries for help. What is a vigilante, anyway? They are illegal heroes who take a stand in lawless towns like Narahata. They only use their own strength and sense of justice. But the question is, why do they break the law? And someone said they had recently read about it in a book. Meanwhile, Jubi and Ikemoku were just walking down the street. While the two were chatting, they heard someone shouting. It turned out to be the Crawler being chased by a villain. He was asking for help. When they asked what was happening, he replied that he had tried to stop that rampaging villain, but he hadn't anticipated how tough the villain would be. So, he said he tried to outrun him, but the villain was speedy too. The two seemed not to care, as they just let him be and told him he kinda sucked and good luck. Even though Koichi was crying and saying he was going to die, people were watching and cheering as the two faced each other. Popstep arrived just in time and landed on top of a building. She caught everyone's attention and Koichi greeted her. But using her mic, Popstep simply announced that everyone's favorite free and live community-based concert, Narafest, was coming back. It would happen on the first Saturday of that month at exactly 10 o'clock. It would take place at the rooftop sky park of Marukane Department Store, Narahata branch. Below, Koichi was clearly in distress and told her that she should stop advertising. And so he said he should call a hero or the police. She replied that she had already done so and pointed to Captain Celebrity. While flying, Captain Celebrity greeted everyone in Narahata with a good afternoon. He introduced himself as the main man, Captain Celebrity, while the villain continued to attack Koichi. Because of this, Koichi asked him to skip the intro. With that, Captain Celebrity effortlessly defeated the enemy. The people who witnessed this cheered enthusiastically. Koichi thanked him for saving him, but he replied that he should be the one thanking him. Brave boys like him preserve peace in that town. He approached him and said, particularly him. In fact, they should sit down and discuss how justice works there going forward. He invited him, and Koichi agreed. So Captain Celebrity carried him and took him along. The scene shifted to Koichi's penthouse. Captain Celebrity admitted that, in truth, he didn't like his style. The way he confronts villains, then realizes he can't handle it, and then it becomes his problem. Koichi agreed that was correct, but he explained that not everyone is born with an awesome heroic quirk. So, the only thing ordinary citizens like them can do is help each other the best they can. And if they can't manage, then they call the pros to save them. Isn't that how quirk-powered society works? He asked. He became curious if this was about the social contract. However, Captain Celebrity asked why he didn't just stick to being an ordinary civilian. Because what he was doing was more than just helping others. When he goes around acting like a hero, he adds to Captain Celebrity's workload. Koichi just scratched his head, admitted it was indeed a real pain, and apologized. Popstep was also with them there and asked Captain Celebrity if he would show up at the next Narafest. Having a pro hero was supposedly the sure way to attract a bigger crowd. He replied that it would be pro bono work for him, and that would be difficult because of his schedule. Woohoo, Popstep responded. They weren't paid for it either. They're just a bunch of kids working hard after school. But he replied that this was just their hobby, perhaps even playtime, but in Captain Celebrity's case, it's his job. Koichi then approached Popstep and said it would be better to talk directly to Makoto. He was certain that Captain Celebrity would just complain and make excuses. Captain Celebrity responded that the two have no respect for the work that pros do. Koichi then addressed him, saying if he really cared about his schedule, why was he hanging out there with them? He clarified that Makoto had booked him for so many events that he didn't have a spare minute to breathe. He paused and said, when they summon him, he gets a break there. So he had earned that right. Plus, their heated kotatsu was really nice. Suddenly, his phone rang, and when Koichi answered, It was Makoto looking for her boss and asking if he was at his place. He was surprised that she called and signaled to Koichi not to say he was there. But Koichi replied that he wanted to say he wasn't there. Captain Celebrity was annoyed at this. Because of that, Makoto quickly arrived at the penthouse to pick up her boss. He hid underneath and excused himself to Pop Step, who became irritated because she was changing there. She kicked him in the face and said that was harassment and she would sue him. He replied, anything but a lawsuit. Makoto was pleased to find her boss there. Captain Celebrity then explained that he had rescued that boy and returned him there, and now he wouldn't let him leave. Makoto asked if that was really the case. They still had a commercial photo shoot and interviews for a finance magazine and a fashion magazine. His schedule was extremely busy. Pop Step emerged from behind the curtain and asked if she could watch the filming, but Makoto refused. She said they were already short on time that day. So, Captain Celebrity quickly carried her to return to work. Koichi and Pop Step also came out, just watching as they left. Koichi commented on how busy their lives were. Upon returning inside, Pop Step said that what Captain Celebrity had said earlier was true. They were causing trouble for the captain and other heroes. She thought they should avoid nasty villains. Koichi also pondered this. He said that quite a lot of strong villains had been appearing lately. They were extremely ferocious. The type of villains who didn't transform back even when knocked down. These were very different from the trigger victims they had fought before. Pop Step wondered if drugs weren't the cause of that. Then were they really villains? Koichi just stared at their corkboard and didn't know the answer either. Their situation was difficult, especially with his master absent. He stared at Knuckle Duster's equipment hanging there and took it. He wondered if he should start carrying a weapon for self-defense. Pop Step replied that he had mentioned this before, his desire to have a katana. Nevertheless, if the fight became serious, it surely wouldn't end well. Pop Step added that it wasn't their duty to fight villains. It was enough that they were freelance sidekicks. The type who calls real heroes when they spot people in trouble. She's saying that that's what they do. But Koichi was still deep in thought while staring at Knuckle Duster's equipment. When he put it back on the board, he said it seemed Pop Step was right. And she replied, yes. On the other hand, a chain villain was shown who claimed that when it comes to speed, he was the fastest and no one could stop him. Meanwhile, the day of Nerafest had finally arrived. Pop Step captured everyone's attention and thanked them for coming. She announced that the event was hosted by Marukane Department Store. Nerafest was a free, local, and live concert extravaganza, and so she asked if everyone was enjoying themselves. She then said that the final performance for the morning would be Can't Help Loving You, performed by the Little Sisters from St. Lila's Academy for Girls. Enjoy, she said. The sisters entered the stage, and on the count of 3, their incredibly cute performance began. A sexy woman also attended the festival, and she was surprised to see a familiar face. It turned out to be Aizawa, who called her Kiyama. She hadn't expected to see him at that kind of event. However, he replied that he was just having lunch there and was on the job. When she noticed him eating a burger, Kiyama mentioned that it wasn't good for him to eat junk food. So she asked if he ever ate vegetables. He countered by asking if she deliberately came to nonsense events like this on her day off. She clarified that she enjoyed such events. It was supposedly lovely to see the small, ripening fruits that shine like jewels for the brief season of their lives. He replied that if she continued to talk like that, she would surely gain a reputation as a weird old lady. Kiyama was shocked by what he said. Suddenly, someone called for Eraserhead, and it was Detective Naomasa. He apologized for making him wait, explaining that the examination had taken longer than expected. Meanwhile, Pop Step's fans were running around the area. They were Teruo, Jubi, and Ikimoku. Teruo noticed Eraserhead as they passed by and looked at him. Meanwhile, Naomasa was curious about the woman accompanying him, so she introduced herself as Midnight. She said, "Long time no see," and called him Detective Tsukachi. He could only scratch his head and apologize, saying he couldn't recognize her when she wasn't in costume. The detective then shared information about a new type of villain. He explained that this was another variant of instant villains. In Teruo Onijisawa's case, this was the second time he had been arrested as an instant villain. However, his body structure, both internally and externally, had undergone a major transformation between incidents. Externally, he was completely different. At first, they thought his out-of-control quirk was the cause of the transformation, but when they repeated the examination, no further changes had occurred. His new body appeared to be semi-permanent. The blood of villains arrested from Narahata in recent months, including Teruo's, was found to contain several times the lethal dose of Idio Trigger, or the drug they were investigating. This made them curious about whether an overdose of Trigger was leading to lasting transformation. However, he answered that it wasn't the case, and he thought it might be the opposite. Someone seemed to be working hard to enhance their bodies, which enabled them to withstand increasingly higher doses of Trigger. The scene then shifted to inside the green room. Someone spoke to 3 newcomers there, and it was revealed to be Mio from the underground idol duo Feathers. She said that if they treated Narafest like some run-of-the-mill amateur hour, they're gonna have problems. A pro hero was coming, so every performance needed to be golden. The little sisters were thrilled at what they heard, blushed, and replied okay. Pop Step then called for her attention and whispered that Captain Celebrity wouldn't be able to make it. When asked what she meant, Pop Step explained that she had asked Makoto if she could make it happen, but he had another commercial shoot that day. Mio couldn't believe it, especially since she had just mentioned the arrival of a famous pro hero. One of the little sisters approached and asked which hero was coming. She was visibly excited, but Mio replied that it was a secret because they couldn't ruin the surprise. Pop Step couldn't believe her response. You peeked through the stage curtain, and when asked if there were any pro heroes in the audience, she noticed a racer head at one of the tables. She quickly responded that it didn't look like there were any. Pop Step became stressed and wondered what she should do. Suddenly, she seemed to have an idea. At that moment, Koichi peeked in to check on them. He noticed some bento boxes on the side and asked if he could take one, thinking that there must be extras. He was delighted to get a bento box while Mio stared at him as if she had a plan in mind. Pop Step insisted that Koichi couldn't be involved. However, after the break, Pop Step returned to the stage and, although uncertain, introduced their special guest for the day. Someone pushed Koichi onto the stage, and Pop Step introduced him as the Crawler, Narahata's very own dude who was like a hero, but not quite.
What?
The audience's reaction was blank when he appeared. Koichi could only scratch his head, not knowing what to do. When he looked at Pop Step, she thought to herself that he shouldn't look at her and should just do something. Nao Mesa was puzzled when he heard the name the Crawler. He remembered one of the Narahata Vigilantes. He looked at his notes and noticed that the name written there was Crawler. He found it confusing. Midnight was surprised by what he said because she knew him as the MC's manager. Back on stage, despite being nervous, Koichi announced that since he was already there, he might as well sing Can't Help Loving You by Otomo Zaka's. The audience was shocked that he would sing the same song that the Little Sisters had just performed. Koichi began singing with full energy and matching choreography. He was really feeling the performance. From backstage, Mio observed that when someone was halfway good like that, people didn't know how to react. Her sister apologized to the Little Sisters, but they replied that it was fine and that he was kind of funny. However, they asked when the hero that was mentioned earlier would appear. Mio was troubled that she hadn't resolved the problem. Meanwhile, Captain Celebrity's commercial shoot was shown. He was with Ingenium. The narration in the commercial stated that one shouldn't give up on progress, because as long as they continue to drive forward, the loop will once again take them to the future. The capital's central loop highway in Narahata was fully restored. The director mentioned that the scene would end there and they would add overlay text. It was perfect timing. When the take finished, they looked at the monitor to watch the shot. Captain Celebrity didn't seem satisfied and requested to rewind a few frames. He pointed to a scene where, before his big pose, his bangs fell in front of his face. He thought it looked pretty uncool. The director responded that it was only for a second and could be edited in post-production. Another staff member added that if they reshoot everything again, they would be asking too much of Ingenium. While wiping his sweat, Ingenium replied that his legs still had some kick left in them, and since they were already there, they could do one more take. Makoto apologized to him and thought to herself that Captain Celebrity was being selfish. Ingenium responded that he understood that international heroes don't settle for less than perfection. Captain Celebrity was pleased to hear this, noting that Ingenium had a real professional attitude, which he greatly appreciated. A man was then shown mentioning that he appreciated it too. He looked suspicious and clicked something on his phone. The reshoot began with trucks speeding along for the scene. The top of one opened, revealing a villain tied up inside. The director gave the signal for scene 21, take 3, and after counting to 5, gave the go signal to Ingenium. The narration about not giving up on progress repeated, but was interrupted when there was suddenly a commotion and a crash in the background. Ingenium looked back, puzzled. The villain escaped from the truck. Someone radioed to Ingenium that there was a villain at his 6 o'clock. He responded that he could see him. He stated that it's a big guy, but it's quick too. He looked at him with a grin, and Ingenium noticed through his visor that this was the bat jerk he had chased previously. The villain quickly flew away, and Ingenium pursued him. Not so fast, he said as he caught his foot. The villain called him by his name and told him to learn to quit because today he would be defeated. He slashed at Ingenium, causing him to let go and fall. Now, the villain said, it was time for the others, referring to the Vigilantes, with the crawler among his targets. Ingenium fell to the ground, and Captain Celebrity promptly rushed over to check on him. Ingenium replied that he shouldn't worry about him and should focus on that villain instead. When Captain Celebrity pursued him, he was impressed because it seemed like he had finally met his match in terms of speed. At that rate, he couldn't overtake him. Someone instructed Captain Celebrity to just keep an eye on the villain, and they would call the airborne heroes of that city and set a trap. Captain Celebrity was concerned, wondering if this wouldn't make him look useless. Someone called Makoto and said that their boss was giving them a guff again. Back at Nerafest, in the conversation between Eraserhead and Detective Naomasa, the detective explained that as he was saying, Teruo Onijisawa and the other next-level villains disappeared for several weeks or months before they attacked. He believed their bodies were remodeled before being heavily dosed with trigger. Essentially, they were being groomed to become villains. Such a criminal undertaking would require an organization. Meanwhile, Koichi continued his performance and singing on stage. As the bat villain was flying, he caught his scent. Because of this, he quickly followed the smell to find the crawler. Back to the conversation, Eraserhead responded by questioning what such an organization might be after. Their instant villains lost all sense and reason and weren't capable of complex criminal schemes. And regarding the next-level villains, they can't even run and hide after popping up to do some damage. They might attract attention, but still, they seemed like disposable pawns. This meant that the mastermind was secretly using their influence for a greater goal. That's right, said Naomasa, which was why their investigation needed his help. Their conversation was interrupted when the villain arrived from the sky. They noticed he had grabbed someone, and Pop Step realized it was Koichi. Eraserhead stood up and witnessed the villain escaping with Koichi through the air. The bat villain was pleased with this, but Captain Celebrity came to the rescue, suddenly saying it's over as he punched the enemy. He thanked Batboy for slowing down. When Captain Celebrity targeted the villain, he dropped Koichi, who screamed in fear. However, Captain Celebrity quickly rescued him. He carried Koichi in his right arm while holding the bat villain in his left. He remarked that Koichi made a perfect bait, and now he had found a use for him. Those at Nerafest witnessed the event, and the little sisters were amazed. Pop Step and Feathers congratulated Koichi for a good job, and they were relieved that a pro hero had indeed arrived. Captain Celebrity landed on the stage where he put down Koichi and greeted the audience. They cheered enthusiastically for him. On another day, the performers' practice began. The Little Sisters and the president of East Narahata High Dance Squad were there. While the Feathers were stretching, they asked each other where Pop Step was and if she had skipped practice. The sister replied that she was heading to Osaka today. Mio couldn't believe this, and Yu was troubled that she had mentioned something about it. She clarified that Pop Step would be participating in a regional idol collaboration show, which annoyed Mio, who questioned why she hadn't heard about it. She complained that it wasn't fair and that she also wanted to go on tour. Yu remembered what Makoto had said about Mio definitely getting jealous, so she shouldn't know about it. The two were suddenly scolded and told that there should be no personal conversations during practice. So Yu whispered that normally, Makoto was too busy to arrange such things, but Pop Step was good at managing her own schedule. Mio asked if Pop Step was going to Osaka alone, and Yu replied that she was going with her manager, Koichi. Mio remarked that he was useless. While running, she added that he was the type of guy who would miss the train while buying a bento box. Yu was concerned about her prejudice. Nevertheless, in the next scene, Koichi was shown panicking because what Mio had said was accurate. The train doors had closed on Koichi because he was buying a bento box. Pop Step was concerned because he had missed the train at Tokyo Station. Pop Step was talking to someone who said they had the tickets, schedule, and address. Therefore, she would go to Osaka and the venue alone if Koichi didn't make it. She said it was fine and that she would find a way. When the train arrived at Shinagawa, Koichi suddenly appeared at the door, which greatly surprised Pop Step. Koichi just scratched his head, and Pop Step asked if he had really run to catch up with the bullet train. Koichi laughed and replied as if. In a flashback to what happened earlier at Tokyo Station, as Koichi was running frantically, he suddenly jumped and clung to the side of the train, still carrying his bento box. He was worried that he might fall. However, he realized that he was sticking to the wall, which made Pop Step curious as she ate the contents of the bento box. Koichi explained that it was like a magnet or suction cup. He felt the repelling force from his hands and feet had become suction or adhesion. Pop Step then asked if his quirk had been inverted and if that was even possible. He replied that it wasn't exactly inverted. It was just a matter of which direction the force went. When he thought about what happened, he realized he had done this before subconsciously. When he felt his body lift off during turns or against headwinds, it was like it had clamped down. He couldn't believe he had awakened a new move. Pop Step admitted it was impressive, but the way he figured it out was ridiculous. When they got off the train, they went straight to Super Minami Shopping District, where Koichi immediately tried his newly learned move and stuck to the wall. Pop Step commented that good for him, and he should work that out when they get home. While still on the wall, Koichi noticed something not far away. A man looked shocked while the apparent culprit was hurriedly running away. Fat Gum appeared, chasing after the culprit. He said, "Not so fast," and called him punk. The person had committed assault and battery, so once he finished eating his takoyaki, he would arrest him. The man pulled out a gun and shot at him, causing Fat Gum to drop his takoyaki. The bullet squished against Fat Gum's body when it hit him, so he called the man a damn fool. He couldn't believe he thinks that such a small toy could hurt him. Fat Gum, the tender tank of Naniwa. He told the man to prepare himself because he would hit him for each wrong thing he had done. The man became worried when Fat Gum positioned himself to flick him. He hit him 6 times, enough to make his face swell up. The man protested that he had only shot once. But Fat Gum replied that he wasn't referring to the bullets, but to the takoyaki, his 36 tasty treats. Fat Gum was surprised when Koichi showed him that his takoyaki was safe. He had managed to catch them in a box using his quirk. Because of this, Fat Gum told the man that it seemed he did him wrong. So, while the man was lying on the ground, he gave him 6 pieces of takoyaki. After that, he thanked Koichi and Pop Step for their help. When he asked if they were tourists and where they were headed, they answered that they were going to SS Mall in Super Minami. He was surprised because that's where he was going too. But he was startled because apparently it was supposed to be a secret, so he told them to forget that he mentioned anything about it. He pointed to the street they should take and assured them they would see the mall there. However, he reminded them to be careful. A little while later, they reached their destination and entered the mascot idol carnival green room. Koichi was impressed when he saw the guests there and told Pop Step to look at the weirdos. Pop Step was annoyed with him and told him not to call them weirdos. Someone then got Pop Step's attention and thanked her for coming. She recognized Pop Step and called out to her. She knew she was from Tokyo Marukane. Pop Step greeted her, and the woman replied she was pleased to meet her. Suddenly, the person made a cutting gesture with her fingers and introduced herself as Haika Crab. She posed and said she was Monica, an official idol for the Kani Doge chain. Koichi was caught off guard and just said okay, while Pop Step bowed to her and said it was nice to meet her. Monica replied that those from Tokyo had no sense of humor. She made another crab-like gesture and said, "What if I snip you good?" Koichi was shocked by her behavior. Monica just turned around and said, "Tough crowd." She was concerned, wondering how she would make that act national. Pop Step then called her Miss Kaniashiki, but she replied that she preferred to be called Kaneko. She explained that a big wave of mascot idols would be coming soon, and when that happened, she would become Haika Crab. The two were surprised by her transformation, but she quickly returned to normal and said her shtick or gimmick would surely become popular in the country. She then cheered Pop Step up for the day. Soon, Monica moved on and noticed Willows from Nagoya. From behind, Koichi commented that she was spirited. He thought they should also come up with a trademark shtick for Pop Step, but she suggested they shouldn't. In the media waiting room, only authorized personnel were allowed inside. Fat Gum arrived just in time and said he thought he wouldn't make it after dealing with the punk. Naomasa was also there and thanked him. Fat Gum replied that he was happy to see him and asked if his name was Tsukachi and if he was from Tokyo. He mentioned they had a live feed from security cameras throughout the facility. Fat Gum couldn't believe there was a drug deal happening at a mascot event. He remarked that the baddies had a unique way of thinking. Naomasa said that it was easier to bring in exclusive products at a free event like this one. Before long, the program began. The MC spoke and thanked everyone for their attendance. They announced that the Farm Fresh Mascot Idol Carnival at Asaha SS Mall was about to begin. Meanwhile, Naomasa was monitoring the CCTV, including the green room. The goal of their investigation was to figure out how the illegal drugs were circulating. They needed to identify who had the goods and take them down. Well, that was the plan. They were told to mention if they noticed anything suspicious. Naomasa then noticed Pop Step and recognized her from Narahata, and they kept an eye on her. It was time for Pop Step to perform on stage. She sang a jingle about Maracana, which invited everyone to visit Marquette. She gave her all performing the solo version of the Maracana department store theme song. After her singing, she invited the audience to visit Narafest if they were in the Tokyo area, a free and live event held monthly at the Narahata branch of Maracana. When she went to the green room, Koichi greeted her with nice work. When he asked if she was ready to go home soon, she mentioned that Makoto had suggested they visit other places at the venue first. Koichi agreed to look around. So after her performance, they visited the stalls in the area. Koichi noticed there were many souvenir stalls there, and Pop Step explained that the whole event was created to promote local specialties of the area, and the mascot idol thing got tucked on. This made Pop Step wonder if she should come up with a special product too. Koichi was curious if she meant something like Narahata Manju. Suddenly, someone called out to Pop Step, and it had claw-like hands. It turned out to be Monica, whom they had met earlier, though they called her Kaneko. They asked about what she was wearing, and her co-worker answered that they have remodeled industrial lifting arms to be a walking advertisement for Connie Doge. She added that costumes were the real spice of the event. Koichi was surprised that it even counted as a costume. Kaneko then asked if they had eaten yet, because she was selling Connie Doge crab rice bento boxes at a very cheap price. But they replied that they had just eaten on the way in the train. Meanwhile, an organizer called Kaneko because she needed to get ready for the stage. So she said it was time for her to shine. Koichi then asked Pop Step if she wanted to watch. Kaneko hurriedly left, saying she would go all out. Her companion quickly followed her and told her not to run like that because it was dangerous. Kaneko suddenly stopped because her stomach seemed to hurt. When her companion asked if there was a problem, she mentioned that their trademark bento ain't sitting right. But she quickly took it back and said it was just a joke. This worried her coworker. She then left her crab suit and ran to the restroom, while her companion urged her to hurry. She replied that he could talk to the other performers first. Her coworker was puzzled by her behavior. At the stage, the Willow, Nagoya's bouncing trio representing Oyanaji Confectionery, had just finished their performance. When the MC introduced the next performance, Kaneko's coworker became concerned and just looked at his watch, while Koichi and Pop Step were still waiting. They exchanged glances, and Koichi was surprised by this. The scene then shifted outside, where two men were running. Someone was chasing them, so the two were rushing to escape. However, they were intercepted by fabric that wrapped around the posts when they tried to enter an alley. They were caught by their pursuer, who was none other than the pro hero Eraserhead. He asked if they were the Hata brothers who ran a black market shop. One of them suddenly transformed when Eraserhead said he just had a few questions for them. The two didn't deny being the Hata brothers. One introduced himself as Ichiro with skills, and the other as Jiro with the power. They both transformed into large grasshoppers and jumped to perform a double Hata kick to fight him. Eraserhead was surprised they immediately used Trigger. This meant there was no longer any reason to check the contents of their stomachs. He said he really loves it when things were nice and rational. Flashback to a conversation between Eraserhead and Naomasa, where the detective requested his help. The detective explained that there was an organization behind the drugs, human experimentation, and all quirk-related crimes in the Narahata neighborhood. Currently, they were calling it the Villain Factory. He asked Eraserhead to gather intelligence on the streets. Eraserhead was puzzled because fighting was more suited for him. He said being a detective wasn't his thing. Midnight interjected and told him not to be like that and to help them. As they were walking, Midnight mentioned that since Eraserhead was from that area, his connections to the underworld made him suitable for the job. She assured Naomasa not to worry. Though he might look grumpy, when push comes to shove, Eraserhead would do what was necessary. Back to the present, Eraserhead was annoyed because Midnight wouldn't take no for an answer. And before he knew it, she might even have him work as a school teacher too. He had already wrapped up the two brothers with his binding cloth. He sat on one of them and apologized because he was just talking to himself. He then proceeded with his purpose and first stated that he wasn't police. Therefore, this wasn't a formal interrogation. They could also claim that their use of violent quirks was self-defense, as he had egged them on. To start with, their use of the trigger was in a gray zone, so they should just think of this as a friendly chat. The two brothers were irritated and said that no matter what he asked, he wouldn't get anything from them. Eraserhead pulled something from his pocket and showed them pictures. When he asked if they knew who was in the photo, the two brothers answered quickly without hesitation that it was Kamayan. They were troubled because he was missing and asked if Eraserhead knew where he was. The scene shifted to a recycling shop called Hoppers where some mugs were being sold for 4,800 yen. The three of them were inside the shop, and Eraserhead revealed that Kirihito Kamachi, known as Kamayan, was imprisoned and facing charges for court crimes. Captain Celebrity dealt with him recently when he appeared as a giant villain. The two brothers apparently worked there, and while drinking, one admitted that they had heard something weird had happened. The other couldn't believe that the person being referred to was the Kamayan they knew. They were puzzled by this giant story because Kamayan wasn't big. Perhaps he had managed to pump himself up, they speculated. He was fond of using bad trigger, after all. This made Eraserhead curious. Ichiro recounted that it became popular 6 months ago. There were uppers or stimulants mixed in it, which caused users to rampage. Jiro added that it seemed risky, so they had warned their buddy Kamayan to stay away from suspicious drugs. Nevertheless, he was a dumbass. Ichiro boasted that they ran a respectable racket. Their trigger was a proper product, cut with pills to prevent baldness and erectile dysfunction. Eraserhead thought they probably didn't have a license to sell pharmaceuticals. The two became nervous about this. Ichiro insisted it was just for personal use as his hair had been thinning lately, and Jiro added that he needed assistance down there. Eraserhead then suggested they drop that topic, saying he was actually curious about the bad trigger they mentioned. He wanted information about the sellers, suppliers, and anything unusual in sales trends. If they provided answers, they would get to see Kamayan. But not anytime soon, since the detective in charge was out of town. The two were surprised when he mentioned the detective's trip. He asked if they had heard about the crab route. Back at the mascot idol carnival, Kaneko was still in the restroom, singing to herself. But she had actually come from a supply closet where she was talking to someone she called Fat Yen. She asked that if she finished her work quickly, could she return to the stage. When asked why, she admitted she was more suited to being an idol than a police officer. He replied that she wasn't suited for that either. Kaneko added not to worry because her funny gags made her the perfect undercover idol beauty. Besides, it wasn't like she could choose just one job or another. He responded that was going a bit far. All she could do was undercover work, but she insisted she had nailed down the beauty part. She commented that was rude and she wasn't joking. But Fat Yen said it was hard to tell when she was joking. Someone called her Officer Kaneyashiki, and it was Naomasa who said that Connie Doge had started unloading farm-to-table products at the mall's service entrance. Once she confirmed there are drugs disguised in the food packaging, they would proceed with the takedown. Detective Naomasa, who was apparently her boss, had said that until then, she would be alone there. So, she shouldn't take unnecessary risks. She cocked her gun and replied sure. Kaneko prepared herself and said, "Now, the hottie investigator is moving out." Fat Gum responded that she should stop with her gags as no one understood them. She became annoyed and said she wasn't joking. Back at the stage, Kaneko was still missing and she was the next performer. The audience was waiting, while backstage, Kaneko's coworker was talking to Pop Step. He explained that they had first become friends with Kaneko and now they were helping them out. He couldn't believe it as she still hadn't returned. Pop Step got into the crab suit while the man explained that operating the suit's arms was simple. Once on stage, She was instructed to just make it look good and crab-like. Koichi was concerned if this was okay. He didn't think an official mascot idol could just be replaced by someone else. The man was surprised that Koichi called Kaneko an idol. He scratched his head when he realized that's what the event was about. He thought they had registered her as an idol, so to speak. But at their office, Kaneko was just a sales staff they send out on the road. The two were very surprised by this revelation. He added that when she was at the marketplace, she was a pro at selling their products. Koichi remarked that seemed right since she really did look like a merchant. Nevertheless, the man said she had a bad habit of suddenly disappearing from work, so he was wondering what had happened this time. Koichi commented that she seemed extremely free-spirited. The scene shifted to the Asaha SS Mall loading dock, where Connie Doge was unloading products. There was a man using industrial lifting arms similar to Kaneko's earlier. He was using the claw to lift products from the truck. Kaneko was hiding nearby and reported that she was on the scene. The Connie Doge freezer truck was there, along with 2 industrial mechs and 3 workers. She sighed when she realized that there were drugs mixed in with the frozen crabs they're unloading. In a flashback to their meeting about this operation, Nao Mesa discussed that based on their investigation so far, they had discovered that the target was operating through distribution channels and inserting drugs there. It was even possible that the goods would end up on people's doorsteps. This meant they were leeching off networks of legitimate businesses. And because of this strategy, they could easily flood the market before anyone realized what was happening. Fat Gum asked if there were any major leads yet. He thought those punks wouldn't make a profit if they were putting in so much effort just to move a small amount of goods. The detective believed it wasn't about money. One of his colleagues had pointed out that these people didn't care about the financial side based on their actions. Kaneko, who was also at the meeting, commented that it was a pain in the butt, because if they weren't doing it to make money, it would be harder to read their moves. But maybe that's where she would come in. Nao Mesa agreed. They needed to pin down their distribution route by catching them in the act at the marketplace. If they could do that, they would get closer to figuring out the villain factory. At this point, back to the present, Kaneko was all fired up because it was do or die. She prepared to make her move. She showed herself to the workers there, waved, and greeted them. They were surprised and asked what was going on. She replied that there seemed to be something wrong at the market, so she was sent to quickly verify the merchandise. One worker wondered about this sudden development and asked if they could continue unloading. She said yes and told them to carry on. She borrowed his tablet, saying she'll just do her thing. Meanwhile, in the media waiting room, Nao Mesa was on watch and noticed that Kaneko seemed right at home with the business, which he said was her only saving grace. Fat Gum commented that her quirky charm gave her a free pass wherever she went. Nao Mesa laughed and agreed she was quite good. He explained that Connie Doge shipped out all kinds of crab, but their packaging never changed. Therefore, you couldn't identify which was which. And since everything was frozen, it was all crated very tightly. Perfect black boxes, as he put it. Kaneko continued examining the items at the loading dock. She mentioned that management was in charge of placing barcodes, so if there was any suspicious stuff mixed in, nobody else would know. She scanned one box and called it a lucky find. It was a Deluxe D, but unfortunately, they only had Deluxe A, B, and C in their catalog and website. This meant what she found contained premium goods for a special sort of customer. But when she opened it, she was puzzled to find only boring old crab inside. Upon inspecting the box, she found no false bottom. However, she noticed it had many ice packs of 2 different types. She seemed to figure something out from this when suddenly her co-worker arrived and asked if she had discovered the issue. He was surprised that she had opened the box, saying it could no longer be sold. Kaneko was annoyed by his nagging and said she was busy. The situation suddenly escalated when Kaneko pulled out a gun and pointed it at the man, asking who he really was. The man was shocked and claimed he'd just taken that part-time delivery job. But Kaneko knew he was lying because she knew all the part-timers and what they looked like. She reported that there was a suspicious character there. She added that she had found goods as well. She hadn't noticed them at first since they were disguised as ice packs. She stated that the delivery destination was on the tablet she was holding, and she had a material witness who could be interrogated. She declared that it seemed like mission accomplished. Nao Mesa acknowledged and said the standby team was coming in. The man smirked and said not bad. Kaneko warned him to freeze because if he moved, she would shoot him. Nevertheless, he quickly moved, and he hurriedly ran away. He got her gun, though she insisted it was hers. Kaneko quickly hid behind some boxes and reported that she was facing a villain there. Furthermore, he had taken her gun and the tablet with evidence. Suddenly, Fat Gum burst in, saying, "Is that so?" It turned out he was the Fat Yin that Kaneko had been calling earlier. He said, that's where he came into the operation. The police entered as well and ordered the workers there to freeze. They stopped them from working and made them raise their hands in the air. They pointed their guns at the man who had been talking to Kaneko and asked what he was doing. But he didn't answer. Fat Gum challenged him to use the pea shooter against someone like him. But the man just dropped the gun he was holding and said he wouldn't do that. He was only there to dismantle the route. Nao Mesa became concerned because the man had tampered with the tablet containing evidence. The man pressed a button for the C or AB lift arms systems, and surprisingly, the claw-like appendages of their crab machines started moving on their own. The person inside was confused because it moved by itself and started beeping. Nao Mesa and his team were also puzzled as it suddenly attacked everyone there. Fat Guy was annoyed and didn't expect the sudden attack. Meanwhile, back at the festival, Connie Doge was sharing their latest cryo technology that kept their products fresh from the moment they were caught. Because of this, their independent shipping network had grown, connecting the source from Hokkaido to 50 shops nationwide. This was the presentation being given by Kaneko's coworker on stage, while Pop Step was inside the crab machine. He added that this was the secret behind Connie Doge's pledge to provide Japan with a consistent, delicious experience, anywhere and anytime. The audience booed, saying they didn't care about that. They requested that they just sing or do some trick on stage instead. Pop Step was extremely embarrassed and was thinking about just going home, when suddenly the machine she was wearing began to move on its own. It started beeping, which alarmed her. In the next scene, Fat Gum is shown concerned while being attacked by cargo-carrying crab claws. He tried to stop the two out-of-control lifting arms, and unfortunately, he got hit on the head by one of them, which worried Detective Tsukuchi. However, that attack seemed like nothing to Fat Gum as it bounced back while saying it was nothing for him. He prepared to punch as a counterattack, which made Kaneko quickly shout not to do it, pointing out that the two workers there were innocent. Because of this, he realized that they were hostages, which made their situation more difficult, and he wondered if he needed to wear his kid gloves here. He became determined after that, and while using his quirk fat absorption on the two cargo crabs, he shouted that a lot was being asked of him here, but he was the man for this job. While the cargo crabs couldn't move because of his fat, Kaneko quickly acted and praised Fat Gum. Upon approaching them, she quickly used her fingers as scissors and easily cut the metal harness locking the workers to the cargo crabs. After that, it was explained to us that her quirk is called Snip Clip, and supposedly almost anything can be cleaved between her fingers. They immediately escorted the hostages, and she told Fat Gum that nothing was holding him back now, so Fat Gum started destroying the robotic suits. While doing this, Fat Gum asked if Kaneko wouldn't get in trouble for using her quirk given her cop status, to which Kaneko just laughed and said she only needed to type an apology for that. The mysterious speedster commented that what they did wasn't bad, when suddenly Detective Tsukuchi shot at him, hitting near his foot while shouting for him not to move. He seriously told him that the next bullet that comes out won't miss, to which the enemy just said to stop this act, while Kaneko quickly informed him to be careful because the man was a speedster. This made Tsukuchi think that if that's the case, then if they take their eyes off him even briefly, he could quickly counter them. He tried to subdue him by ordering him to raise his hands slowly and lie face down. The enemy sarcastically agreed to this and said if slow is what they want, it's fine with him. Unfortunately, they lost focus on the speedster when the cargo crabs suddenly rattled. It seemed to be out of control again, and after the bulbs on its head that served as eye designs lit up, it suddenly exploded loudly, destroying the frozen crab products beside it. They were concerned about this and wondered why they suddenly self-destructed, and they were also disappointed because their evidence was affected. This made Tsukuchi and the others look toward the explosion, puzzled by the enemy's destruction of evidence. Because of this, the speedster managed to move while commenting that his thinking was correct, which made Tsukuchi curse in frustration. In an instant, the man seemed to become a lightning bolt and quickly went behind a wall. Before leaving, he taunted them by saying goodbye, so the police shouted for him to stop. They heard shouting from the event venue, which caught their attention. Kaneko immediately became concerned as she remembered there was still one crab mech in the place, but she also quickly realized they still had evidence there. While she was just thinking about how bad the result would be if it exploded amid many people, Fat Gum suddenly carried her and told Tsukuchi that they would handle the trouble there, so he should chase after the villain, to which Tsukuchi gave a roger. At the event stalls, we can see the crab mech suit controlled by Pop Step starting to cause chaos. She worriedly asked how she could stop this crazy thing. The owner just panicked while thinking how would he know that, while Koichi quickly acted to help her. Unfortunately, when Pop Step crashed into a stall, the stacked products started to fall, and because of this, Koichi was hit by them, which knocked him down. The civilians were concerned about him and asked if he was okay, while he was thinking it would be better if he had an All Might hoodie here. However, he suddenly noticed the fabric that fell on him, and when he flipped it over, he noticed something about it. Then we suddenly moved to Fat Gum and Kaneko, who have arrived at the scene, and Fat Gum commented that the crab mech really caused damage to the place. As Kaneko looked around, she quickly noticed where that mech was. She said they should stop it immediately because it would explode once it reached the Kanadoge stall. Because of this, Fat Gum tried to run, but Kaneko pointed out that he needed to be faster, though he said this was as fast as he could go. To their surprise, Koichi appeared beside them using his slide and glide, and quickly overtook them. Fat Gum asked Kaneko if she had mentioned anything about speed, while she wondered who that was. Koichi continued speeding up to catch Pop Step, and before long, he successfully did so. He prepared himself and suddenly jumped, and using his sliding momentum, he threw himself to stick to the crab mech. Using his newly found technique with his quirk, he started to reverse its use to make his limbs stick to the crab mech. He immediately asked if Pop Step was okay, to which she was happy to see him. He commented that it was good she wasn't hurt, and that they should thank the hoodie he was wearing for that. Pop Step wondered if he bought it today. When Pop Step questioned if it was an All Might hoodie, he grinned and proudly said he was a bit different today. He claimed to be the man in top spirits because he got a rare souvenir hoodie called the Crawler, Tower to Heaven style. This irritated Pop Step because he prioritized that. She commented that it was nice, but told him to get her out of there first, which made him sheepishly agree. However, he asked her how he would do that, which further irritated Pop Step and made her shout that he was a useless idiot. After that, we are shown the stall where Koichi bought the All Might hoodie, with the vendor happily thanking him. While this was happening, we shift to Tsukuchi's pursuit along with other guards chasing the speedster villain. He pointed out that the bomber was armed with a dangerous quirk. He said that the villain wasn't following even after they had given verbal commands and warning shots, so they had no choice but to shoot. However, the villain started to speed up again, and while easily avoiding the bullets, he asked if they hadn't heard what Kaneko said earlier about him being fast, and tauntingly said that their guns were useless. Tsukuchi countered this and shouted that he could still be hit. He suddenly fired his gun and managed to graze the villain's left thigh. He immediately ordered his fellow police officers to restrain the man. As they approached, he said that given how the villain was trying to waste their time, he realized that his acceleration required a few seconds to cool down after being used, so shooting during that interval was the key. When they caught the man, he just smirked, but after commenting on how observant Tsukuchi was, all the guards who tried to subdue him suddenly froze. They seemed to become statues for an unknown reason, so before long, the villain easily crawled away from the numerous guards who had piled on top of him. When he stood up, he felt the pain from his wound due to the grazing bullet, and he was irritated by Tsukuchi's intelligence. He couldn't believe he was hit. When he checked if he had broken any bones, he didn't see any and confirmed he was just grazed. After this, he took one of the guard's guns and checked what kind of bullets it contained. He saw that they were only rubber bullets, and this is when he realized why they didn't hesitate to shoot at him. He called them idiots and said it would have been better if they had chased him while ready to kill, rather than not. However, he said it still hurts when you get hit by those, so he decided to shoot the police officers' bodies with it. He also spoke to the frozen Tsukuchi and told him not to get the wrong idea, as he was actually a stand-up guy. He claimed violence wasn't the way, so that's why he would only shoot his bulletproof vest. But if he still died from this, it would be his own fault. After that, the surroundings returned to normal speed, and because of this, the police officers collapsed due to the rubber bullets he had fired at their bodies. Tsukuchi's group struggled to move after that. so they could do nothing as the villains slowly walked away from them while commenting that they were done there. In the next scene, we return to Pop Step's situation, and here she's asking Koichi how his tinkering with the crab mech is going. Koichi told her that he found a shut-off switch on the back, but unfortunately, he couldn't override the rampage. Fat Gum continued running while carrying Kaneko, and here they were worried because the mech was getting close to the crab stall that would cause it to explode. He added, "What was with that kid who jumped on the back of that crab mech, and was he planning to die?" Kaneko shouted that they had no choice, and Fat Gum already knew what to do. Fat Gum was reluctant about whether they should really do what she was suggesting, to which she agreed, so Fat Gum consented. Kaneko held onto Fat Gum's arm while he prepared to throw her. After winding up, he threw her, and while flying, she shouted, "Rocket crab clip." Because of this, Kaneko managed to slice the legs of the crab mech, and here it's explained to us that she can also cleave almost anything between her legs. She slid on the ground afterward, but she was still happy because she cut off its feet. Unfortunately, because of this, the mech started to spin around on the ground, which made Pop Step scream and worried Koichi. Just as Koichi was about to move again, Kaneko quickly stopped him and asked if he was correct that he was Pop Step's sidekick, pointing out that it would be better if they got away from there because they were all in danger. He reasoned that Pop Step was still trapped there, which surprised Kaneko and made her ask why she was riding on it. While running toward Pop Step, Koichi explained that it was because their manager requested it, which left Kaneko speechless as she said she was the one to blame for all of this. When they reached the mech, she immediately apologized to Pop Step while cutting the metal harness. The eyes of the crab mech started flashing, which caught their attention. Kaneko shouted in alarm that it was still going to explode even though it had stopped, which also worried Koichi. They quickly ran away from the crab mech while telling people to run and not just stand there unless they wanted to die. Koichi told Pop Step to leap away, but when he looked back, he saw that she had fallen, which concerned him. He quickly did a slide and glide to save her, and when he got close, he shouted for Pop Step to hold on to him. When Pop Step reached him, he hugged her and started to drift away from the crab mech. However, they still seemed to be heading straight toward it, which worried Kaneko. Suddenly, Fat Gum jumped toward the mech and shouted that he had the situation covered. He landed belly first on the ticking time bomb crab mech, and before long, it exploded while he was on top of it, but due to his shock absorption skill, he was able to contain an impact inside his body by burning fat. Because of this, Koichi and Pop Step crashed into Fat Gum. Fat Gum stood up and tried to tell Koichi that the bomb was too big to hold for long, so they should leave. Kaneko also quickly told the people there that the danger wasn't over yet, so they should all leave. Koichi quickly slid and glided away from Fat Gum while carrying Pop Step, and soon after, Fat Gum's body released a strong impact as part of his shock absorption process. Kaneko shouted in concern for Fat Gum, but as the smoke cleared, we see Fat Gum in his low-fat mode, and he seemed to be okay. Because of this, people smiled and cheered in joy when they saw he was safe. After that, Fat Gum asked Kaneko if anyone was hurt, to which she replied that it didn't seem like anyone was, but the whole place there was wrecked. Fat Gum started eating a lot of crab rice while saying they should go to Tsukuchi to provide backup, but he needed to fatten up a bit first. When the manager arrived at the scene, he surprisingly asked Kaneko if she wanted to explain this, to which he said he would learn the full scoop later, so he should just wait. The manager was puzzled, and when Koichi and Pop Step heard what she said, the two thought that it would probably be the same for them. After that, Koichi informed her that they were about to leave to catch the train home, so he asked if she was sure she didn't need to call their home and say she would be late. Pop Step replied that she didn't want to surprise her parents about this, which Koichi understood as a good point because his mom would also go crazy if it were him. They exchanged looks with the manager after that, and after a few moments, Kaneko was surprised when she learned that the manager had let Pop Step and Koichi go home. The manager explained that it was their fault that those two were involved in this chaos, and he couldn't make them stay there anyway. Afterward, he asked her why she was with the police here, to which she disappointedly said that those kids wouldn't get in trouble, but they were witnesses to everything that happened here, which left the manager speechless. The manager then immediately let them know that they had left a way to be contacted, and he gave a calling card to Detective Tsukuchi. Tsukuchi was pleased with this, but when he read his sister's name, Makoto, he was left speechless. In the streets, Koichi moved quickly while carrying Pop's step. He commented that they went through a lot today, but they still managed to have some fun somehow. This made Pop's step ask just how easygoing he could be, pointing out that they almost died, while all Koichi could think about was buying souvenirs at the station for their friends. After a few moments, they were already on the bullet train heading home, where after eating their bento boxes, they fell asleep together during the journey.